Now, how many of you are familiar with this hymn, In Times Like These? In times like these, we need a savior. In times like these, we need an anchor. Be very sure that your anchor holds and grips that solid rock. This rock is Jesus. Yes, he is the one. This rock is Jesus. Be very sure that your anchor holds and grips that solid rock. And Christ has also stated that he will be our refuge in a time of storm. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in time of trouble. Psalm 46, be still and know that I am God. The reason why I have begun with those words, because it's evident what's happening there in Florida, different places. Many people have been in the path of Hurricane Milton. And they also just went through the previous hurricane, Hurricane Helene. Now, we'll be covering that and more in this presentation, addressing number one, war on misinformation. There's a war against free speech, a war against our constitutional rights, a war against the First Amendment, a war against God's word, liberty of conscience. Next is going to be war against free worship, freedom of religion. Also, I'm going to be addressing with my host, my co-host, my guest today, weather modification. And along with that, we'll also be addressing predictive programming. And today I have my special guest, no stranger here, Marie Diaz from Eyes on the Times. Welcome, Marie.
Thank you, Pastor. Never let a good crisis go to waste, right?
That's what they say. Never let a good crisis go to waste. Let's get right into it. So what's trending right now?
Right. Well, we're going to jump right into this first article, and as you mentioned, there's a war on misinformation. So when you take a look at this article from New York Times, it tells us that misinformation is getting in the way. And of course, this is in the context of this recent hurricane, specifically Hurricane Helene. When you look at this next article from AP News, they're telling us that this rhetoric is truly a dangerous narrative. And of course, there's always a narrative, and they don't want us to deviate from that narrative. And as you continue looking at this next article from The Hill, I just want you to realize that the quote unquote misinformation is running so rampant that they had to establish an official rumor response page. And so this is important as we're moving forward in this presentation. So let's just take a look at this clip here where they're going to discuss that.
Let's roll that.
As rescue operations continue on the ground in the southeast, officials are working to not just clear debris and look for survivors. They're also separating fact from fiction amid rumors and misinformation that have spread online in the aftermath of the storm. Officials say former President Donald Trump is among those amplifying false claims. He's accused the federal government of withholding aid from Republican areas and claimed without evidence that relief money is being diverted elsewhere.
$1 billion was stolen from FEMA to use it for illegal migrants, many of whom are criminals, to come into our country.
The problem getting so out of hand, FEMA launching a rumor response page on its website, addressing that claim and many others.
Right. So as we continue looking at this, there's another article from CNN. Again, so we're equating the two, where they're saying that too much information and not enough money. And so that's largely what this crisis is about, at least as far as the quote unquote misinformation is concerned. And I just want to point out the fact that for those that are on the right, what they're looking at is they're seeing that, or they believe that the money has been misappropriated, right? Those on the right are actually pointing to some of the statements that have been made by the current administration. And of course, they mentioned the fact that they have used some of the FEMA funding to fund migrants. And of course, those that are on the left, they object to that, right? What they're saying is that the money that FEMA used for the migrants had nothing to do with the funding that's used for the hurricane victims. And so I just want us to also bear in mind that this is in the backdrop of us sending billions of dollars to Ukraine and also to Israel more recently. And so many of the individuals who are suffering from this recent hurricane, they kind of feel like the $750 that have been given to these hurricane victims is a slap in the face. And so it's becoming really a political issue. And so we're going to take a look at another clip here. And what I want your audience to really pay attention to is what is the result of this rhetoric that's happening? What are some of the individuals, how are they responding to the new revelation, of not having enough funding? So let's take a listen to that.
Let's talk about some of the misinformation that is out there, including these claims from former President Trump that FEMA is about $1 billion short because money has been going to undocumented immigrants. Also, that the areas of the Republican areas of the state are being intentionally ignored in some fashion.
It's frankly ridiculous and just plain false. This kind of rhetoric is not helpful to people. It's really a shame that we're putting politics ahead of helping people, and that's what we're here to do. We've had the complete support of the state. We've had the local officials helping to push back on this dangerous, truly dangerous narrative that is creating this fear of trying to reach out and help us or to register for help. People need resources, and we need them to get into the system. And it's just, a shame that people are sitting home on their comfortable couches while we have thousands of people here on the ground that have left their own families to be able to help those in need.
So much is going viral online as well. One user suggested yesterday that a militia should go against FEMA, got more than 500,000 views. What kind of impact has this had on the recovery effort?
It has a tremendous impact on the comfort level of our own employees to be able to go out there, but it's also demoralizing to all of the first responders that have been out there in their communities helping people, FEMA staff, volunteers, the private sector that are working side by side with local officials to go out and help people. I need to make sure I can get the resources to where they're needed. And when you have this dangerous rhetoric like you're hearing, it creates fear in our own employees. And we need to make sure we're getting help to the people who need it.
Did you hear that? She repeatedly said dangerous narrative. And, George Stephanopoulos made a point to mention, which it is true. I did see the video where there's some individuals that are calling for the formation of a militia. And so, of course, when you hear that, people become very nervous, they're very fearful. And so, they've got to create straw men so that they can get to the ultimate goal, which is to strip us of our freedom of speech. But that's not really what we're discussing today. I also, going back, I just wanted to make another point here. Remember that there has been a lot of predictive programming, right, that has been happening with, the recent Civil War movie and various movies that have come out, right? And they're sowing the seeds for unrest, and I just think that they're looking for the right crisis to kind of get things moving. And so could this potentially be one of those things that could help to exacerbate that? Of course, will it happen? I don't know. We'll have to, we'll have to allow things to kind of fall the way that they may. And so the other point that I want to mention is the fact that we're getting mixed messaging from this current administration. We're taking a look at this next article from AP News, and it says Mayorkas warns FEMA doesn't have enough funding to last through the hurricane season. If you can pull up this next article from the New York Post, remember, as I just mentioned, we just sent billions of dollars to foreign countries. They're expending all of this money on migrants, and all of a sudden, the hurricane season, of course, I don't live in those states, but it seems that the hurricane season just began, right? And they're already telling us that they don't have any funding. So imagine, right, if you were one of those individuals, in North Carolina, if you've been devastated by this disaster and now they're telling you that they no longer have any funding, how would you feel? So do you see how what's currently happening can ignite this unrest? And of course, the Bible tells us that these things are some of the things that are going to agitate these end time events. And so let's just take a listen to this clip from Mayorkas so you can hear it from the horse's mouth.
And before we go there, and that's why we're told how important the 5 keys of survival are. Because if we are relying on the government, they're now telling us they don't have enough funds. They're running out of funds because of this emergency. So as these emergencies compound, then things are going to get worse. And you can easily see that they'll begin to force people to do things against their conscience in order to survive. And that's why that fifth key is so important, that we can assist others, especially those of the household of faith. Very, very important.
One quick thought, Pastor. You had mentioned this previously in one of our other presentations where you discussed the fact that during the previous crisis that took place, they discussed digital currencies, right? And offering assistance to individuals through, some sort of digital currency. And so, this is the potential trajectory of what could happen when you aren't implementing, the 5 keys of survival. Just wanted to mention that.
And for those who want to search for that article, it's actually, if you punch in Nancy Pelosi, and she was talking about digital currency for those who went through the pandemic. Punch that in and you'll see that article. She was also uniting with some folks who are connected to the Jesuits, to Pope Francis. And Mayorkas, the one who's over DHS, is now telling us, running out of funds, and Mayorkas is Jesuit educated, Jesuit trained. So we can see it's all connected to Babylon. Last day events are fast fulfilling before our eyes. It's time to implement those 5 keys of survival. Here it is.
Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas sounding the alarm on FEMA funding right after the devastation of Hurricane Helene. Listen.
We are meeting the immediate needs with the money that we have. We are expecting another hurricane hitting. We do not have the funds. FEMA does not have the funds to make it through the season.
This all comes as the Biden-Harris administration spent over $1 billion from a FEMA program on services for migrants.
Right. So we can see how things are heating up, right? And so, of course, now they're setting out this narrative, and we're going to take a look at another clip here. And what I want you to notice from this clip is they're acknowledging the fact that people are no longer trusting the official narrative, and there's this, mistrust of those that are in charge. And so, might I add that, again, people are deviating from the official narrative. And this is, an issue that they're going to have and they're going to try to quell, as we're moving forward. So let's take a look at this next clip.
Marie, every earthly support will be cut off. And that's why, as God's people, we cannot be government paupers.
Right.
We're seeing it now. That's Ministry of Healing, page 183. We'll get to that.
People may not be getting what they need right now because of misinformation, but you say this could have longer term impacts too. Can you explain how?
Misinformation during breaking news has always been common, but it's dangerous for the reasons you just mentioned and the mayor mentioned, is that it could prevent people from seeking out aid and resources from local officials or state officials. And the long-term impact is people in need who need that assistance might not be actually reaching out and trusting institutions, and so slowing down the recovery process. And it's creating long-term mistrust in these organizations and in these institutions at a time where people need it the most.
Right. Again, never let a good crisis go to waste, right? And so they're seeing this rhetoric. And remember, this always happens. People are always questioning the official narrative, but they're going to use this, again, to be able to forward their agenda. And so what we're going to take a look at also is the fact that this rhetoric has increased recently. We're seeing it all over the place. We're just going to mention 2 individuals in particular. We're going to take a look at this next clip, which is coming from Sky News, where Hillary Clinton says she's actually warning that we lose total control if social media content isn't moderated.
Before we roll that clip, I want everyone to realize that we know what the end result is going to be. That's the enforcement of the mark of the beast. You can't buy, you cannot sell, except you worship falsely. Now, the devil knows if he can bring people to a time of crisis, then people will be willing to give up their rights. Look at the accounts in the Bible. Look at Jacob. Look at Esau. At what point did Esau sell his birthright? At a great time of need. He claimed to have been starving, about to die. At that point, he gave up his birthright. So could it be the devil will bring these calamities and bring people to a point of need, even a life and death situation, then roll out the system of the mark of the beast? Look at Christ. Satan could have tempted Christ day 1, day 2, day 3. No, but he waited until the 40th day. 40 days and 40 nights. He came to Christ at the point of breaking, but praise God, Jesus overcame. So all these accounts are written so we can understand America is going to be brought to her knees. People are going to suffer. And that is how they'll roll out the system of the mark of the beast. Get ready. 5 keys of survival must be implemented. Here's a clip.
One more point, Pastor, actually. It's also interesting that you're pointing that out as well, because it's not just when the crisis actually takes place, but for those of us that understand the 3 angels' message, the everlasting gospel, and we understand Matthew and its right, Matthew 24 in the right context, we understand what's going to take place prior to that event, right? And so we're going to be warning individuals, hey, listen, calamities, warfare, pestilences, all of these things are going to increase, right? Whether it's natural or it's unnatural, right? And so again, when we're giving that information out, right, and we're calling it for what it is, they may not want the world to hear that. And so that's why it's so important, again, while we have the opportunity to share that gospel, even before the crisis breaks.
Here's a clip.
We should be, in my view, repealing something called Section 230, which gave, platforms on the internet immunity because they were thought to be just pass-throughs, that they shouldn't be judged.
Look at the guy on the left, the host, Scarborough.
Mm-hmm.
One more time.
We should be, in my view, repealing something called Section 230, which gave, platforms on the internet immunity because they were thought to be just pass-throughs, that they shouldn't be judged for the content that is posted. But we now know that that was an overly simple view, that if the platforms, whether it's Facebook or Twitter X or Instagram or TikTok, whatever they are, if they don't moderate and monitor the content, we lose total control.
Go ahead, Marie.
That's something, right? We lose total control. They have to be in control of what you believe and what you hear. And the interesting thing about it, again, is that she's not the only one who's speaking the same language, right? John Kerry also is saying the same thing. He actually took it a step further. He's actually mentioning the First Amendment. When you take a look at this article from Fox News, it says John Kerry calls the First Amendment a major block to stopping disinformation. Yes.
You know what? I hope the audience caught what Hillary Clinton just said. Sometimes when you want to highlight and emphasize a particular point or organization, but you don't want it to stand out too much, what do you normally do? People normally do. They conflate that institution with others. She mentioned Facebook, Twitter X, and the other one, TikTok. Really? Facebook? Facebook already moderate content. So which platform is she really after? The controversy and the exposing of darkness is not going on TikTok. So which platform is she really against and want to shut down and to control? It's X. It's X. They're very subtle and deceptive. And that's why what we can do now to get the message out must be done now before it's too late. All right? Here's Kerry.
And I think the dislike of and anguish over social media is just growing and growing and growing. And it's part of our problem, particularly in democracies, in terms of building consensus around any issue. It's really hard to govern today. You can't, there's no, the referees we used to have to determine what's a fact and what isn't a fact are kind of, been eviscerated to a certain degree. And people go, and then people self-select where they go for their news or for their information. And then you just get into a vicious cycle. So it's really, really hard, much harder to build consensus today than at any time in the 45, 50 years I've been involved in this. And there's a lot of discussion now about how you curb those entities in order to guarantee that you're going to have, some accountability on facts, et cetera. But look, if people go to only one source and the source they go to is sick and, has an agenda and they're putting out disinformation, our First Amendment stands as a major block to the ability to be able to just, hammer it out of existence. So what we need is to win the ground, win the right to govern by hopefully having, winning enough votes that you're free to be able to implement change. Now, obviously, there are some people in our country who are prepared to implement change in other ways, and so that's really
questioning
dangerous.
Really if democracy can survive unregulated social media.
I think democracies are very challenged right now and have not proven they can move fast enough or big enough to deal with the challenges that we are facing. And to me, that is part of what this race, this election is all about. Will we break the fever in the United States?
Right. That was a mouthful. I don't know if the audience really got the points that he mentioned there. I just want to bring up a couple of things. He mentioned wanting to build consensus where everyone is thinking and acting and basing everything on what one individual or one group of individuals are saying. The other thing is that, he dislikes the idea that we're able to self-select what we want to hear. That's startling in and of itself. That's just one of the freedoms that we have, right? He also talked about the fact that, we need to implement change. And again, this is within the context of the First Amendment, right? And he also talked about the election, right? So when you piece everything together, could it be that they're talking about repudiating one of the fundamental rights that we have, right? The freedom of speech, the First Amendment. Are they going to repudiate that during this next election? I don't know. And the other thing that comes to mind is who gets to determine what is or isn't truth? Right? We're smart enough to be able to determine what is or isn't truth. And they're saying that, no, you aren't, right? That we have to determine it for you. And so the last thing that he said is that, this election is about whether or not we will break the fever in the United States. That is startling. It's solemn to think, that he's able to say that, without any reservation. And it just goes to show you where we are in Earth's history. And also the fact that the Bible and the Spirit of prophecy has told us that, the principles of the Constitution are going to be repudiated. Revelations chapter 13, I believe verse 11 tells us that the United States is going to speak like a dragon, and you're hearing it. And it's just, a few more steps and we're going to see these things take place. I don't know if you wanted to say anything, Pastor. If not, we can continue moving forward. We're actually going to switch gears just a little bit here. This next video clip, what you're going to hear is this news reporter. She's actually, again, bemoaning the idea that they're not able to control the narrative. She's also going to mention the fact that people are actually, or she cautions against us hearing other voices, right? That we ought to be skeptical when it comes to hearing people, or you should have to go to certain venues to be able to hear news. So let's just take a look at this.
And also again, they aren't talking about MSM or legacy media. They're talking about X, and that's why, let me put the plug in. Those of you joining us now, I would encourage you to follow us on X platform. Mark my words today. And secondly, they're talking about platforms that are considered alternative media. Several months ago, there was an article and a video clip that was went viral when they were talking about back in the day. They're actually reminiscing on the times when everybody got their information from one news outlet or two, Washington Times, I believe, and the New York Times. But now, and then they said, we were the gatekeepers of information. But since the internet, they have lost that control. So they want to control every form of platforms that communicate with the people. So there's one narrative. And let me be clear, this is a modern day Tower of Babel. When everybody spoke one language, everybody is controlled. On the secret societies, false worship, that's where we are right now. So we can see Babel is Babylon. Babylon is about to fall, just as Babel was overthrown. Get ready, friends. Here it is.
Now, you say you're already seeing signs of misinformation related to Hurricane Milton as well. What's happening there?
This is how the online world functions. It's pivoting from one disaster to the one that's barreling towards Florida as we speak. We're seeing a number of falsehoods circulating, different types of conspiracy theories. It's crucial for people to remain skeptical of what they see online, but also to realize which information they can trust.
Right. So every crisis, right, they're mentioning the fact that, we're avoiding listening to the narrative. But now we're just going to move into this crisis that's currently taking place in Florida with Hurricane Milton. And we're just going to see how what I believe is that this wasn't accidental. And you'll see why I say that later on in this presentation. But before we delve into that, I want us to just take a listen to the rhetoric, the language, the tone that these individuals in the mainstream media are taking as they're describing this hurricane that currently is taking place there in Florida. We have this article here from New York Post. I'm just going to briefly mention, it says Tampa mayor issues dire warning before Hurricane Milton. If you choose to stay, you are going to die. Just really, really strong language. And of course, she mentions the fact that this is a monster storm. And so let's just take a listen to the mayor of Tampa here.
This is literally catastrophic. And I can say without any dramatization whatsoever, if you choose to stay in one of those evacuation areas, you're going to die.
Wow. I mean, that is an incredibly blunt message. And I know you have a lot of experience dealing with these storms. You don't say something like that lightly, Mayor.
I've never said that. And 10 to 12 foot surge. I mean, if this takes a jog to the south, that's going to save us from the storm surge, but it stays on the track that it's projected to be on right now, or if it goes a bit north, would be even worse. Some of the predictions are saying that Pinellas County, to the south of us, the entire county is going to be underwater. So this is something that I have never seen in my life, and I can tell you that anyone who was born and raised in the Tampa Bay area has never seen anything like this before. People need to get out.
And your message is just, this isn't survivable.
If we have that predicted storm surge, it is not survivable.
Right. Very strong language, right? And sometimes, they use this strong language, rhetoric, right? And it's to invoke strong feelings. I'm not saying that, this crisis is something that, we should disregard. But what I want your audience to notice is that they're invoking these strong feelings, right? And then they're going to equate it with climate change. And this is key to our presentation. So when you take a look at this next article, this is coming from the Huffington Post. There actually was a meteorologist who, while he was, describing this hurricane, he actually became emotional. And so we're going to take a listen to this clip here, and you're going to see again how they're trying to invoke these strong emotions, and they're associating it not just with the hurricane, but also with climate change. What they're saying is the cause of these new, monster storms.
Just an incredible, incredible, incredible hurricane. It has dropped. It has dropped 50 millibars in 10 hours. I apologize. This is just horrific. Maximum sustained winds are 160 miles per hour, and it is just gaining strength in the Gulf of Mexico, where you can imagine the winds. I mean, the seas are just so incredibly, incredibly hot, record hot, as you might imagine. You know what's driving that. I don't need to tell you. Global warming, climate change.
This man needs an award for best actor in the category of meteorologist. Go ahead, Marie.
Right. Again, did you see that?
Give him a box of Kleenex, please.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, as we're moving forward, I just want the audience to think about this. Our job today during this presentation is not just to regurgitate the news, right? There's a lot of talking heads that are here to tell you what's going on with this hurricane. What we want you to realize is that there are spiritual implications to this. I just want to read something from Great Controversy, page 589, paragraph 2. This is speaking of Satan. It says, he has studied the secrets of the laboratories of nature, and he uses all his power to control the elements as far as God allows. Did you catch that? So Satan has studied nature, right? And he's using those who are being controlled by him, right, to be able to control the weather. This is what the spirit of prophecy is telling us, right? And of course, you may say, well, that's just the spirit of prophecy. The Bible tells us that during Job's day, right, that Satan caused calamities to befall Job. And so, you know, the Bible and the spirit of prophecy work hand in hand. But I just want to also mention paragraph 3. It says, even now he is at work. And she says, Satan is exercising his power. He sweeps away the ripening harvest, and famine and distress follow. It says these visitations are to become more and more frequent and disastrous. Now, that is so interesting, right? Because didn't we just experience Hurricane Helene? Now there's Milton, there's Nadine that's brewing. I've heard of Kirk and Leslie. There's all sorts of calamities happen. And Pastor, this presentation would be too long to mention the fact that Wyoming, 760,000 acres are on fire.
Yes.
I bet most of your audience didn't even know that, right? There's like a blurb in the news. I just recently heard that the Sahara desert, is flooded. You know, all of these things are happening all at the same time. And Sister White says, the Bible tells us that they're going to increase in rapidity and intensity. And so back to my thought, what I want you to realize too is that a lot of these things, and you know, we mentioned in the title that there's predictive programming, and this is where we're going to change gears here. We're just going to take a look at this website here. And this is actually a legitimate website, you know, from Tampa Bay. It's called Project Phoenix 2.0, right? And it says, and the video that we're going to eventually play was created 4 years ago. Right. And the video was a simulation. It says a hurricane simulation for Tampa Bay small businesses and emergency management agencies. Right. So they created this hurricane simulation. And when I tell you down to the very date, I hope your audience catches this because I'm going to reiterate it. The very date that they used for this hurricane to take place is the exact date that Milton hit. I just can't even wrap my mind around that. But not just that. There are other similarities there where the hurricane hit, Tampa Bay, all sorts of things that were to take place during the simulation we're seeing. And this is what is so startling. And this is why I referenced that quote from Sister White, is because we're told that Satan is already at work. He's already doing things to bring about some of these crises. And so we're going to take a look at this video here. And the video was 20 minutes long. And so we tried to condense it as much so that you can see just, you know, again, predictive programming and how they're actually able to work through the elements. So let's take a look at this video here.
Here it is.
And we have Category 1 Hurricane Phoenix just south of Jamaica now. Phoenix is currently expected to...
Wait. That is a simulation with October 10th?
October 10th. Your audience can go back and look at it for themselves. October 10th. And when did Milton hit? Today.
I just want to make sure
yes,
they saw that and
yes,
comprehended that.
Mm-hmm.
Let's continue.
And we have Category 1 Hurricane Phoenix just south of Jamaica now. Phoenix is currently expected to make landfall in the Yucatan Peninsula as a Category 2 storm. But of course, always, we are keeping a close eye on this system.
There has been a noticeable shift in the forecast track from the NHC overnight, which now brings Phoenix into our viewing area, possibly as a strong hurricane. Now is the time to begin those preparations, folks. We cannot stress enough how crucial it is that you finish your storm preparations tonight. Conditions will deteriorate rapidly tomorrow morning, and evacuation routes will quickly become impassable. Please don't take this lightly and heed all evacuation orders.
Phoenix is now a Category 5 hurricane with maximum sustained winds at 160 miles an hour. The wind gusts up to 200 miles per hour. This is catastrophic. I believe this is near Kawa Coffee, and as you can see, the storm surge has completely inundated downtown. Law enforcement now is reporting that all bridges have been cut off by storm surge. We're looking at up to 20 feet of storm surge in some spots.
We're trapped on the third floor of the Tampa General Hospital parking garage, and the storm surge is up to the second floor of the hospital.
St. Petersburg is essentially an island right now.
The damage this morning is unimaginable. The beaches are essentially gone.
The Howard Franklin Bridge is completely destroyed. I've never seen anything like this.
Officials are scrambling to clean up debris from local airports in order for supplies to be flown in.
Can you imagine? Can you just imagine? Now, I don't know if the damage that was predicted in the simulation is actually going to take place, but can you imagine? If, we're told that, God's spirit is being withdrawn. And, once Satan takes control, I don't think we can imagine what he is going to unleash on God's people, and it's just a scary thought to think of that. There's one point yes, sir.
Before we go there, but as you see the simulation, we must also be reminded that just before the pandemic hit, they also had simulations.
They did.
They even wrote out movies as a simulation, and everything in that movie, in those simulations, actually took place. So what we're seeing now might be, or it may be in the next one or the subsequent one. So these things are telling us to get ready. Secondly, it's going to take something catastrophic to cause the people to cry out and say, we are willing to give up everything so we can be saved, so God can bless America. If it's even to give up our constitutional rights, we'll do it. What? Worship on Sunday so God can bless America? Turn this nation back to God? If that is the solution, we will go along with it. So some will believe it, mark in their foreheads. Others do it based on compromise, the mark in their right hand. It's going to take something catastrophic, earth-shattering, earth-moving to cause them to want to say, we want the mark of the beast to be implemented. Now, what I just said is in the Bible. Because what did Satan do to Job? He destroyed everything in Job chapter 1. Even Job's family, to get Job to bow down, curse God, and to worship Satan. That's what's coming. Job 2, let me touch his body. It's going to take something earth-moving for people to give up their rights and say, we will receive the mark of the beast. We will call for the mark of the beast. Revelation 13, verse 13 to verse 17. And lastly, what happened in the book of Job will be repeated. James chapter 5, verse 7 through verse 11. And remember, in that same book, Great Controversy, that same page, page 589, while appearing to the children of men as a great physician who can heal all their maladies, he'll bring disease and disaster until populous cities are reduced to ruin and desolation. Preacher, let's put that back on the screen right there. And let me repeat that. Until populous cities are reduced to ruin and desolation, that's when they'll say, we want the mark of the beast implemented.
Mm-hmm. You know, Pastor, and of course, like I said, for sake of time, we couldn't include everything. There was other reports that this hurricane was so strong, it was spawning tornadoes in different areas. You know, but there was one other point that I wanted to mention. You know, some may go back and look at the entire video, right? And they may say, well, you know, yeah, there's some similarities between this simulation and what took place with Milton, but that doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, what you're implying is correct, right? But what if, just follow me for a moment here. Perhaps the simulation may have been to see if they could time the hurricane. Did you stop to think about that, right? It literally took place the same date, 4 years later, that was mentioned in the video, right? And not just that, the location as well. So could it be that they were trying to see if they could steer, right? And actually time the hurricane? And what that leads my mind to is, what if there's another situation that's supposed to take place in the very near future, right? And they want to time and send whatever they want to send. It doesn't necessarily have to be a hurricane or whatever. What if they're able to, you know, steer the storms? And these are the types of things that we have to think about, because like I said, as we just mentioned from the quote that we just read, that Satan works in the laboratories. And so we're going to change gears just a little bit, right? Because you may think that I'm conjecturing and that what I'm saying isn't factual, that there isn't any evidence out there to, you know, validate what we're saying as far as entities, right, or agencies, you know, that have the ability to be able to control these things. We're going to take a look at this first article from Huffington Post. And of course, this particular lawmaker, MTG, and I had very few things in common with her, but she was correct when she made these remarks. It says, Marjorie Taylor Greene says they can control the weather, right? And of course, they're saying that she's promoting conspiracy theory. And we're going to take a look at this next article from The Independent. It says, controversial Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene has claimed that a mysterious they can control the weather after Hurricane Helene killed more than 24 people in her state and a total of 200 acres, right? It says, yes, they can control the weather. It's ridiculous for anyone to lie and say that they can't. On this, I do agree with her, right? And we're going to show a video, and we're going to show several slides proving this fact, where on the mainstream media, they have acknowledged the fact that they do have the capabilities of controlling the weather. And this isn't some, recent revelation. This is something that, dates back even to the Vietnam War. So I want you to take a listen to this next video clip and hear for yourself.
And just to make sure we pin this, as Christ works through human agents, Satan also works through human agents. That's the missing link. Here it is.
You know, they were talking about climate change yesterday, and now we're learning that scientists and researchers are looking at how to change the weather on purpose. That's right. Lasers now could one day manipulate rain and lightning. CBS This Morning contributor Michio Kaku is a physics professor at City College of New York. Professor, nice to see you. Extraordinary seeing Al Gore and Bill Clinton there together with Charlie, wasn't it?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, they did not get into this discussion, though. But it is fascinating. I mean, lasers?
Yes. Marie, I'm going to stop that video right there for a specific reason. But go ahead.
Yes, right. And so we can take a look at a couple of articles here where they actually mention different alphabet groups are able to again, control the weather. Let's take a look at this first one, right? It says so-and-so backs, this study of how to control global weather through geoengineering. We can look at this next article where it says the military wants the weather on its side. Okay, the subheading here says this year's horrid hurricane season has scientists associated with the military wondering about ways to improve predictions. Isn't it interesting that we just discussed that, Pastor? Here's another article. It says scientists think they can control weather with lasers. Michio Kaku just told you they have the capability to do this.
Yes.
The next article from NBC.
Hold on.
Yes.
I want that to be the point, a springboard point I'm going to emphasize right now. Lasers. If you look at lasers naturally, lasers is technically light, energy, lasers. And they can use lasers from the laboratory to create lightnings. Lightnings can spark fire. In Revelation 13, verse 13, he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven in the sight of men, and deceiveth them by the means of those miracles, which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth, that they should make an image to the beast, which had the wound by a sword and did live. That's it. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. And he caused all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark, forehead, right hand, can't buy, can't sell. If you look at the sequential ordering of those events, first, fire, that they claim come down from heaven. That means somebody, some entity will be manipulating the atmosphere, manipulating the weather. That's it. And they'll bring this fire down, and the fire will be used to deceive. That's it. Climate change, combating these tornadoes, hurricanes, since this is our context. Fire on the West Coast, and so on, to deceive. God is destroying us. Let's get back to God. Verse 15, false worship. Verse 16, verse 17, you can't buy, you can't sell, except you receive that mark. The signs are here. Now, full disclosure, the reason why I stopped that video, I just recalled playing that video several months ago, and you woke, didn't like it. And not that portion, what he said thereafter, they called that conspiracy theory, misinformation, and they actually gave me a black and purple eye. So that's why it was paused mid-sentence. But there's an article right here, CBS News, and you can pick it up from here, Marie. Scientists think they can control weather with lasers. Continue.
Right. And this next article from NBC News, because we're talking about hurricanes, right? And again, this is mainstream media. It says scientists have had some wild ideas for controlling hurricanes. I mean, what more can we say, Pastor, right? And of course, there's another article where it talks about various ABC agencies, want to control the weather through geoengineering. And so, for those of us that want to see it, we'll be able to see it. And Pastor, as you rightly mentioned, can you imagine just a few more of these crises back to back, right? And people are going to be crying out for a savior. And this is why, again, it's so important for us to make sure that we're implementing those 5 keys of survival.
Is it not the Hegelian dialectic? They create the same crisis. They create the crises to get the objective, to get the goal implemented. That's Matthew 24, friends. Verse 7 through verse 9. The signs are here. What more can we say? What more? Your closing thoughts, Marie.
Right. Pastor, I want to take a very, very somber, solemn, turn here. I recently was listening to a message from the late Pastor C.D. Brooks, a very solemn message. It's called The Unpardonable Sin. And I've been meditating on it for the last 2 days. And, he mentioned, and obviously the unpardonable sin is grieving the Holy Spirit, right? After hardening your heart, right? When you're resisting known truth. And he equated, or he was drawing parallels between the antediluvian world and the signs that they saw, right, prior to the flood. And the reason, I know you may be wondering, what does this have to do with what was presented today, as far as grieving the Holy Spirit? We are seeing signs one on top of the other, back to back. And, sometimes we may read these things in the Bible, what happened to Noah, how they saw the animals coming into the ark, right? How the sky turned black from the birds coming in, right? And we may look at them and say, how could they see all of these signs and not know that the end was near? And it could be because a lot of God's people, and I'm speaking not only to the audience, but to myself as well, those same cherished sins, right? We keep going back to them after we see these things, sinning against light, right? Where we're hardening our hearts, that we can see these signs and not be moved by them. And so my hope for all of us, as we are seeing these things taking place day after day, make sure that you are prepared. Jesus is coming. The signs are all here. Just a few more events, and that's it. So I'm encouraging us to draw closer to Christ.
God's word says they knew not until the flood came and took them all away. That sounds on the surface as a contradiction. How could they not know when Noah preached for 120 years? They heard the message, but it did not cause them to move in the right direction, to get ready. As God's word says, as it was in the days of Noah, so it's going to be in the last days. Was there a flood? Were there lightnings, thunders? And Noah moved with fear because he heard what was coming. We today have seen signs. We have more evidences today than those who lived in the days of Noah. Noah being warned of God of things not seen as yet. I wonder how many people were calling Noah a wild fanatic, calling him an alarmist. Noah being warned of God of things not seen as yet. That means Noah was a man giving warnings. And that's what this platform is all about, giving people warnings. Then it says he moved with fear. Fear in the sense that I don't want to be caught unprepared. That's the fear. And a measure of fear is good. It keeps us on our knees. It keeps us rooted and grounded in Christ. And what did Noah do? He prepared an ark for the saving of his household. And as we see these things, we need to be preparing that ark for salvation's sake. And that was a literal thing he had to do. What if Noah was relying on the government when the flood came? That means Alejandro Mayorkas would have said, we have no money to help Noah. What if Noah was relying on the government when the flood came? What would have happened? Think about it. Think about it. What would have happened then? Noah didn't even have to see simulations, Marie. He didn't have to wait on simulations from Tampa. It's called what? Phoenix?
Project Phoenix.
Project Phoenix. Because God already gave him the prophecy. Imagine what God has given to us. He's given to us more than the prophecy. Noah simply had prophecy, but no predictive programming, no simulations. And today we have the prophecies plus the simulations. If we are lost, who are we going to blame? He built the ark, and imagine who he was speaking to. And yet they did not get on board the ark. Just imagine Noah had other family members, relatives, did not get on board the ark. Only 8. Noah, wife, 3 sons, and their 3 wives. I wonder if those 3 wives had relatives, family members. Where were they? Did not get on board the ark. The ark is something literal. The ark had to preserve them for the flood. Yes. So what is coming in the last days is not going to be just a flood, a time when we can't buy or sell. So what are we to do? It's going to be that second and third keys in the 5 keys of survival. It's country living. Having food and water and resources on your property for what is coming. That's it. Not being a government pauper. And if you have means, assist those who are less fortunate. But it begins with conversion. That's the first key. And that's what is. Noah became heir, an heir of righteousness by faith. He moved by faith, and faith cometh by hearing, and hearing by the word of the Lord. This is the work of preparation. And I wonder what they said of Noah and his family. And if we are thinking about how people view us, we're not going to get ready. When Noah built the ark, Hebrews 11 verse 7 says, by which he condemned the world. Preaching and building. If Noah was alive today, Noah would be on YouTube. He would be on X. He would be on all the platforms. Rumble. He would be in the streets. He would be downtown Atlanta, downtown LA, downtown Orlando, Miami, Tampa, St. Petersburg. That's where he would have been. New York, New York City. Jamaica, Kingston, Jamaica, Montego Bay, Jamaica. That's where he would have been. Warning and directing people to the work of preparation. It's spiritual and it's literal. Imagine my last words. Animals took the place of people. But not everybody, Pastor, would have fit on the ark. How do you know that? Could God have worked a miracle? The same God who brought a flood, and the flood destroyed trees that built the ark. Since the flood destroyed trees, the flood should have also destroyed the ark. But because he obeyed God, Noah, God preserved him. God could have worked a miracle to save 8 billion people. As it was, so it is. 8 billion today, 8 billion back there. As it was, so it is today. Or Noah would have said, follow me. Here's the blueprint. Build your own ark. Follow God's blueprint. Imagine that. Imagine that sight on the flood, the billows. Instead of seeing one ark, you'd have seen thousands of other arks. Imagine today in 2024, those pictures we see of Noah, one ark on the high billows of the sea. How many other arks would we have seen? Mercy, mercy, mercy. So friends, I leave it there with you. Thank you, Marie, for sharing. And what we need to do, we must do it now. The longer we delay, the more difficult it is going to be. Like and share the video, subscribe. By God's grace, I'll see you tomorrow at 12 noon Eastern for Midday Power Surge. The protest, the Reformation continues. Get ready.